Yes.
No.
Yes.
Everyone, welcome to another episode of The Book Isn't Necessarily Better, a library podcast from the Community Library Network. I'm Mikayla.
And I'm Roxanne.
Today we're going to talk about Mary Poppins and P.L. Travers. Let's jump right in.
All right. First, Mikayla, I just really want to apologize in advance because I don't know if my bad Cockney accent will come out or not.
Oh, I hope so.
It might come out to play.
I hope so.
If we would ever be so lucky as to have anyone from East London listening to this podcast, I'm sorry. But, you know, Dick Van Dyke's already let you down on that, so let's get right into it.
Let's do it.
Mary Poppins was a book series that was written over a 50-year period.
Wow.
So the first book, Mary Poppins, came out in 1934, and the last of the 7 books came out in 1988.
That's crazy.
And you either say there's like 7 or 8 books because there were some books that were like Mary Poppins A to Z. So it was really more of like a cookbook. So that's why it's a little
kind of counts. I'm going to say 8 is the number.
So this series has Mary Poppins. Mary Poppins comes back. Mary Poppins opens the door. Mary Poppins in Cherry Tree Lane. Mary Poppins in the kitchen. Mary Poppins from A to Z. Mary Poppins in the house next door. And finally, Mary Poppins in the park. So who wrote these wonderful children's stories? Well, a very cantankerous woman named P.L. Travers. P.L. Travers was born Helen Lyndon Goff in Queensland, Australia in 1899. Her parents were originally from England, although her father, whose name was Travers Goff, do you see where I'm going with this?
I see where this is going.
His first name was Travers. He presented himself as being an Irishman.
Ironically, P.L. Travers always told people that she also felt ethnically Irish. So she's English, grew up in Australia, but identifies as Irish.
As someone who used to live in Ireland, I can almost hear their eyes rolling from thousands of miles away.
I kind of thought they might.
There's nothing more obnoxious to Irish than Americans or people from any other country being obsessed with them. Basically, it's why are you so obsessed with us?
Yeah.
So her father was a big character. Travers Goff was a banker. You might see some connections to what she writes.
Manager, yeah.
He was a bank manager. He also unfortunately suffered from alcoholism. He died when she was only 7. Now, he actually died in disgrace. He was a big storyteller. He was a lot of fun, but his struggle with alcoholism meant that he was actually demoted from a bank manager to a bank clerk.
Yep.
But they were incredibly close together. She would lie, though, about her father, so you can kind of see exactly where P.L. Travers got this. So her father was a big storyteller. He had a fantastic imagination, but of course, you know, he was just a bank manager, and P.L. Travers would lie and say that her father was a wealthy sugarcane planter on an Australian plantation.
Wow.
And he actually didn't come from much in London, but he did marry into money. So her mother was old money, and I think they may have eloped because he was sort of the penniless boy who charmed his way into marrying her.
Penniless banker.
Exactly. I think that her mother was drawn to, you know, his big personality, but
it's hard not
he
to
sort
like
of
people
ruined
like that.
Yeah, he did sort of ruin her life though, and put the family through a lot of grief.
And how many siblings were there?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. I thought she had at least a couple of sisters.
Yeah, I believe she had a couple of sisters, but there was a big defining force in her life. When her father was struggling with alcoholism, her mother called upon her sister Ellie. Aunt Ellie was a big stabilizing force in the Goff family. She came and she was very no nonsense, but she did, you know, sort of have a twinkle in her eye, and she got the family through their hardest struggles.
Sure.
When her father died, they did sort of have to rely on the charity of their rich relatives, and so they did bounce around. And Helen, I'll call her Helen for now, she moved to England when she was a young woman. She had wanted to be an actress when she was in Australia. She was pretty, but, not every little girl gets to grow up to be a famous actress.
Yeah.
So she did try being an actress for a while. She certainly probably had the personality for it and got a lot of it from her father.
She was in a professional Shakespearean troupe for some time.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, when she was an actress, that's when she changed her name to Pamela Lyndon Travers. So taking her dad's first name as her last name, that officially became her pen name.
And where did she get Pamela? I think she just told people later that she liked how it sounded.
I think she just liked Pamela.
Pamela Travers.
Yeah, she just liked Pamela.
It sounds very English.
Pamela Travers is such a contradiction because by all accounts, she was such a curmudgeon, but then she has this fantastic imagination. It doesn't make any sense that somebody with her personality would also be able to create such whimsy.
But the way that the whimsy comes across is different in different adaptations. I actually think the Mary Poppins of the books is very strict.
She is, yeah. It is just amazing to me that a woman who is very strict also does have the capacity for whimsy.
Well, I bet a lot of that came from her dad and from those childhood memories.
Well, so when she wanted to be an actress, her family disapproved of this. They wanted her to, sort of follow the normal path. They probably were trying to rebuild the family after the death and chaos of having an alcoholic father. She moved to England when she was a young woman, and she became a journalist. When she was 39, she had a pretty long career by then, already of working in journalism. She had become a writer. She never actually got married, but she did have relationships with both men and women. She was really private, though, about her life.
Extremely.
But what's funny about her being so private is that she did sell all of her papers and correspondence to a college near the end of her life.
I didn't know that. That seems so out of character.
She's a woman of contradictions, I tell you.
Okay.
Yeah, so she would get really angry, actually, when people would try to delve into her personal life. But then here's all of my inner thoughts.
But she's dead at that point, right? Like, she's like, okay, after I'm gone, you guys can know everything about me.
I suppose so. I guess it's like Mark Twain writing a biography and then wanting it released 100 years after his death.
Oh, yeah. Kind of like that.
I guess ours would be like everyone reading your texts. But like 10 years after you're dead.
I don't even want to read my own text like 5 minutes later.
So why I didn't want to start a Twitter account because I heard the Library of Congress was archiving all tweets for a while.
Oh, way to go, Library of Congress.
I was like, well, I'm not letting my grandkids read that. So yeah, she had a very private life, but there's some oddness in it for sure. So maybe that's why it was private. Probably. By oddness specifically, I don't mean her personal relationships romantically. I mean her family that she created. She adopted a baby when she was 39. From Ireland. From a literary family that she was friends with. So the grandparents had been taking care of like 8 children.
Yep.
And so she adopted one child out of a pair of twins.
Yeah.
And she chose the better twin, quote unquote. And then she chose her favorite twin that she liked better. She raised him to believe that she was his birth mother. And when he would ask about his father, she would say, and I quote, "Daddy had some sort of accident and died in the tropics." So he believed this.
Wow.
Her son, until he was 17 years old, when the other twin knocked on the door one day.
Enter stage left.
Absolutely. They went to a pub and started comparing notes with each other. And obviously from there, it was a pretty strained relationship.
Right? Like, hey, you look like me. Where do you come from?
Yeah. Well, he had tracked him down and...
His name is Camillus, right?
Yeah.
Did he know about the twin?
No.
I didn't think so.
Camillus didn't know about the twin until one day the twin knocked on his door and said, "I found you." And the twin hadn't had a great upbringing. I think he had been farmed out to various foster families. Whereas Camillus grew up in...
relative nicety.
Pretty wealthy and probably had wonderful experiences being the son of an author.
She's kind of curmudgeonly, though. Who knows?
I know. But,
again, woman contradictions.
Basically, they went and got drunk together and basically compared notes about all of this. And from then on, it was a absolutely strained relationship with his mother, which I can't blame him.
No. That's pretty weird to have happen to you.
Yes.
I imagine.
So she was a bit of a character.
She was appointed an officer of the Order of the British Empire in 1977.
Wow.
And she lived forever.
She did. Well, she died when I believe she was 96.
Ooh. But I mean, she wrote for like 60 years of her life consistently. In the introduction to one of the collections of her books that we do have here at the library, Gregory Maguire wrote it. And he's the author who wrote like Wicked, Son of a Witch, those sort of like fairy tale recreations. So he wrote the foreword to this. And to do that, he went to her house to interview her, and he had this whole interview set up. He gets to her house and she's like in her 80s at this point. He's like, "Oh, are you the meter man?" And he's like, "No, I'm here to talk to Mrs. Travers." And the maid like lets him in, and he sits down, and Gail Travers like starts like talking to him because he asked her like questions about her life and stuff, and she's like, "I don't know why I'm telling all this to the meter man." And then he's like, at the end of the thing, he's like, "I left and she never got her meter read that day." But she was very like up till the end, just very like catty, and also, I mean, sharp, but also didn't quite know where she was toward the end, it sounds like.
She did not suffer fools. I cannot stress that enough.
Right. She would not have liked Roxanne and I at all.
Especially not me. Oh my goodness. So let's talk about Mary Poppins. So now that we know the woman behind the book, what did she create? So let's talk about the book first. Mary Poppins, written in 1934. Man, if you have seen adaptations of Mary Poppins, but you haven't read the book, you're in for a surprise.
Very different.
P.L. Travers was a follower of Buddhism, and there are entire passages of the book that just go off on philosophical rants.
I didn't know she was a
dirges.
Buddhist.
She was.
But now that you say that, looking back on, I just finished it a couple days ago, and I'm like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, there's just passages where there'll be like a snake talking about the meaning of life and how
in a zoo
we're all born to suffer, but let life wash past you, and it makes a lot of sense.
Oh, I need to read it again now, because in that light, it's a totally different book.
Yeah, it's almost a philosophy book. And to be clear, Mary Poppins is not intended to be a children's book.
No.
That really annoyed P.L. Travers. I mean, everything annoyed her, but...
Right. But this especially. This is number one on her pet peeves list.
Really didn't understand why people saw it as a children's book. She was like, just because there's children in it, they're learning lessons. Why would that make it a children's book?
And the funny thing is, I didn't really read it as a children's book either. Really, if you're looking at it, there's not a lot of like what you would call plot.
No, it's like
like a series of adventures.
So yeah, getting into the plot a little bit. Mr. and Mrs. Banks are a London couple. They don't make it clear in the book when this is set, but based on illustrations and a little bit later, like they never say this is 1911.
Right.
Using context clues, it doesn't seem to be the 30s.
No. It's probably more like the late 1800s, early 1900s.
Yeah, the Edwardian period, which is like 1901 to the start of World War I.
That seems more accurate.
And
reflective of almost her own childhood.
Yeah. And in the book, they live in London at 17 Cherry Tree Lane, and they live in a shabby house, Mr. and Mrs. Banks, with their 4 children, because Mr. Banks tells Mrs. Banks that she has a choice. She can either have a nice house or she can have 4 children. And she chose to have 4 children.
And later 5.
Later 5.
Yeah.
Is it Annabelle who comes along in the later books?
Yeah.
So Mr. and Mrs. Banks, they have their 4 children. They have Jane and Michael, who we're familiar with from the movie, but then there's also a set of baby twins.
John and Barbara.
John and Barbara. And Barbara's such a weird name for a baby. Actually, when I was named Roxanne as a baby, my family did feel like it was super weird having a baby Roxanne around the house because it feels like such a grown-up name.
It does.
I totally agree.
Did they call you like Little Annie?
Little Annie.
Little Annie?
It's never occurred to me that Annie could be a nickname for my name.
Yeah, I'm gonna call you that from now on.
It just blew my mind. No, I was called Rocky. My family calls me Rocky.
Okay, see, that's an appropriate childish nickname.
Yeah, but they did think it was weird. Another fun fact, my middle name is Claire because it was the 80s and my sisters were allowed to pick my middle name. And Claire is one of the Babysitters Club members.
Oh. My middle name was picked out of a hat by my great uncles when my grandma was born.
What is it?
There were 7 boys, and then they knew they were having a girl, and they were like, we have no girls' names. So all of the brothers threw names into a hat, and they picked the 2, and that was my grandma's name. So her name is Carol Jean, so my middle name was Jean, and I changed it because I hate it.
What is it now? Pamela Travers?
No, I also took kind of my dad's last name. My middle name is my maiden name.
Oh, you're right. Yeah.
I'm a Ruth Bader Ginsburg for all you out there. I followed that path.
Okay, going back to the Mary Poppins story. So it's already different that there are two babies. John and Barbara.
And they do play a significant part.
They do, and they go everywhere with Mary Poppins and the other kids on all of their adventures. They're just in their little pram.
And they talk to birds.
Yes, so there is an entire story, like Mikayla said, entire chapter. It's actually just different afternoons of adventures that they go on.
Basically.
So for instance, one afternoon is all about the babies, and in this world, before babies turn 1, they are able to speak to basically the elements of the earth and animals. So for instance, they are in their crib at the beginning of this chapter, and they're speaking to sunlight. And they speak to the wind, and they speak to birds. Mary Poppins can also speak to birds and these elements. This leads me to my first question. Mary Poppins arrives by magic. She is a magical person.
On the east wind.
On the east wind, she comes. She says she'll stay until the wind changes. Is she a witch?
I think P.L. Travers would have a real problem with categorizing her as a witch.
Okay.
I think she's a witch.
I think she's a witch as well.
Yeah. She more or less has all of those witchy qualities you look for in a human being.
She has telepathy.
Yep. She can talk to different sorts of animals, and again, the weather and all sorts of things.
Can she fly in the book?
She uses her umbrella to get around, so just like the movie.
Because, well,
like it lifts her on the wind.
Well, in the book, she arrives not by gracefully coming down like in the movie.
Right.
She slams into the front gate
true.
by the wind.
Yeah.
So I think she maybe can like go on wafts of wind.
Yeah.
But she also can teleport herself anywhere by like jumping into pictures or...
Right. Yeah. She can influence the world around her and talk to things that normal adults can't. I say witch.
I say witch. You know, it might be a hot take.
I don't think so. I actually think that's a pretty lukewarm take for both of us.
I think mine's like almost close to boiling, but
okay.
I think my take's hot.
Okay.
And speaking of saying something's hot, Mary Poppins thinks she is hot.
She thinks she is all that and a cup of tea. Man.
In the movie, she's played by the beautiful movie star Julie Andrews.
We're talking about the first one.
Correct.
Yeah.
In the book, she is described as a plain, tall woman. But what I think is very fun is that she's incredibly vain. You don't see a lot of vain characters. Do you? Who aren't villains.
Oh, no. Villains are, always vain.
But Mary Poppins, it's just part of her personality is that they always describe what she's wearing. She's like, she was wearing her new
kid gloves.
Her new kid gloves, and she was very proud of herself and thinking that nobody else in the world must look as lovely and polished as she does that day.
They're Christmas shopping, and Michael's... like, they only have so much time to go Christmas shopping, and he's, like, desperate to pull her away from the window because he's like, I know she would like to admire her reflection more, but we only have so much time.
Yeah, anytime there's a mirror window, she has to stop and admire herself. I really like that.
I do, too, because she's not vain in, like, a vapid sort of way. It's just a facet of her personality.
It's a fact to her that she is great.
And I think that, again, most characters who are vain are either villains or that's the only piece of their character that you see.
Sure, it's usually like a shallow valley girl or something.
Yeah, very one-dimensional depiction.
And I think P.L. Travers was probably vain. I mean, Mary Poppins is really a stand-in for Travers.
Incredibly vain.
Yeah. Like I was saying, they go on all these adventures. They become friends with Bert, who is the match seller. He also has other jobs. He is not a chimbley sweep, though. Yes, I said chimbley.
I know.
He's not a chimbley sweep in the book at all. He sells matches. He draws pictures
on the sidewalk.
I think there's an official name for that of somebody.
Sidewalk artist.
Yeah, he busks. They also have another friend who's not in the adaptations, who is the sort of like the park keeper. They go to the park every day, and so that
does come up in Mary Poppins Returns.
Okay, well, we're going to get to it how I couldn't finish that movie because I hated it. At least in the book, they're also friends with the park keeper. Did you know that Mary Poppins, on certain birthdays that land on Fridays, if they go to the zoo, then there's a big party for her there where all of the animals are outside the cages and they look at humans in the cages and it's absolute whimsy.
Yes.
So in most of the chapters, they have these adventures that are supernatural or something magical happens that absolutely couldn't happen in the natural world. like going to the zoo where the animals can talk. But what's very frustrating is that Mary Poppins totally gaslights the kids.
Hard.
So they'll talk about it later, and she'll say, I don't know what you're talking about.
Jane, don't you remember that charming zoo adventure we went on last night? And then Mary Poppins will say, nobody went to the zoo at night. People don't go to the zoo at night.
That's insane.
That's bizarre.
I am a respectable woman. Why would I be out after 9 p.m. at the zoo?
Right. And then you notice that she has a belt of snakeskin on, which the snake gave to her as a birthday present at the zoo.
It's very frustrating.
It's so frustrating. But it's exactly like as a kid when your parents give you an explanation for something that doesn't quite satisfy your curiosity. You're like, that's definitely not how that happened, but you have to go with it.
But I don't have the tools to verbally fight back on this.
Yeah. Your parents have the authority. She is that figure.
Absolutely. Going into her personality in the books a little bit more, she's crabby, stiff. I really can't think of when she really does show affection to them.
There's no Julie Andrews twinkle in her eye
Absolutely
whatsoever.
Not. She is responsible. She takes care of the children, but she's not there to be sweet.
Yeah, she's not their friend. She is their nanny. And she is going to raise them right.
Yeah, she's super strict. She's severe, is how I put it in my notes.
That's good.
And she doesn't say goodbye. My notes
she just leaves.
Yeah, she basically goes out for cigarettes, quote unquote, and never comes back. Whereas in the movie, they're saying goodbye to her, and it's very tearful. And a few more things in the book. Mr. Banks is hardly in it at all. And that's really different than the adaptation. So let's move on to how the book compares to these adaptations. So the original one from 1964 with Julie Andrews. Yes, I'm correct.
Yeah, I know. I wasn't arguing about that.
I'm always under the fence now.
Sorry, I was not disputing that.
Okay. The 1964 version is a musical. It has cartoons in it. It was a many Oscar winning movie. It starred Julie Andrews as Mary Poppins, who could not be farther from the Mary Poppins of the book. She actually, in sort of her interview with Mr. Banks in the movie, says that she's always cheerful.
Oh, yeah.
Would be...
I always have rosy cheeks.
Yeah, that's just a bald-faced lie if it came from the book Mary Poppins. And she blows in on the east wind,
and blows all of the other nannies out. They're all waiting there. They're queued up to interview, and they just all blow away.
Whereas in the book, it's just her. She just arrives.
Yeah, there's nobody else.
And the children had been running away from their nanny. So Mary Poppins just basically arrives to
lay down the law.
Now in the movie, it's a lot about Mr. Banks.
Tons about Mr. Banks. It's very, I rewatched this as an adult and had a completely different experience than I did as a kid. Because as a kid, I'm like, oh, there's dancing penguins, there's fun, animation things in here. As an adult, I was, crying for Mr. Banks. I'm like, his kids are awful to him. He has this horrible job that he doesn't enjoy, but he does it just to, keep his family happy and healthy, and man, I feel bad for that guy.
Absolutely. The gender roles in the marriage between Mr. and Mrs. Banks, I don't think I know any couples like that today. She's very obsequious with him.
Yeah.
So she is a suffragette, and we find out in Saving Mr. Banks, they make her a suffragette because it's hard for anyone in the 1960s to imagine that a mother would have a nanny
when she's home all day.
When she doesn't have a job.
Right. Yeah.
In the book, she's always going out to lunch with friends.
Yeah.
Sounds fun.
She's always doing some things that today we'd be like, that's not a legit reason to leave your kids.
Yeah.
Or you'd get them a babysitter for the day. You wouldn't have a full-time nanny who lived in your house.
Yes, they also have a full-time maid and a full-time cook. In the book, they have a full-time gardener handyman.
Yeah, all-around general
who they seem
jack of all trades.
Who the dad hates.
Yeah, because he is a layabout. He doesn't ever do anything. But yeah, it's a lot more about Mr. Banks. Mrs. Banks is a suffragette.
She sings.
Oh my god.
And I think we should maybe compress Saving Mr. Banks and the Mary Poppins movie.
Sure. Let's do it.
So let's bring in the movie Saving Mr. Banks. It came out in 2013. And that stars Tom Hanks as Walt Disney and Emma Thompson as P.L. Travers, who plays her wonderfully.
It's about the making of Mary Poppins, basically. So it's not a straight adaptation. It's more of a look behind the scenes. And you get a lot more of the sense that P.L. Travers was a hard person to deal with. Disney wanted to buy the rights to Mary Poppins for a very, very long time. And she refused until she was kind of hard up for cash and needed to sell the rights off. But then she wanted to have full creative control. know, at least according to this movie, I'm not sure how accurate this is to real life. I don't know if you can weigh in on that at all. Basically, one long fight between her and Walt Disney trying to get this movie made, and she disagrees with every single one of their ideas. She thinks the word responsible is stupid.
And then a fun line is, let's not tell her about supercalifragilisticexpialidocious yet.
Yeah, she does not want made up words. She does not want Mary Poppins to be whimsical at all. She definitely doesn't want Dick Van Dyke to be in the movie. And we didn't even talk about Dick Van Dyke in this movie.
And his Cockney accent.
Oh, yeah. His Cockney accent. And just the fact that he's all over it when I don't feel like he needs to be.
She also had an issue with any hint of a romance between Mary Poppins and Bert. Mm-hmm. And Bert, of course, does have different jobs in the movie.
Right.
Not necessarily the same as the book. So he does play, he's a one-man band. That's great. But he's most famous for being a chimbley sweep.
Yep.
With the famous song Chim Chim Puri and Step in Time. P.L. Travers especially had an issue with the cartoon penguins in Mary Poppins.
It's kind of my least favorite. Okay. As an adult watching this again, do you like the original Mary Poppins movie?
I liked the home scenes, I suppose.
Okay.
And it's one of the rare movies where I like the ending better than the first half.
Okay.
I like the bank parts. I like the feed the birds. That song gets me full clamps.
Yep. I just think it's long, and I don't think it translates to now. Like, watching it as an adult, I was like, why
do you mean the full movie or the cartoon parts?
Like, why did I ever watch this as a kid? Because it is so long.
It is like 2.5 hours.
It's very long, and the songs aren't always as good as I remember. There are some really good ones in there, don't get me wrong.
Okay, going to disagree. I couldn't believe that this was a hit parade. These songs were all written by the Sherman Brothers, who were famous Disney composers. They also wrote the Tiki Room songs for Disneyland.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I just don't think it holds up to
today. I think it absolutely holds up. Julie Andrews, international treasure. Looks great as a brunette.
She does.
Dick Van Dyke is wonderful and still alive.
I think he's one of the reasons this movie does not work for me. And I don't think it's his fault, because I'm an old person at heart, and Diagnosis Murder is one of my favorite shows.
Okay, Dick Van Dyke is acting the heck out of it. And is that too much for you? Is that the problem?
And I think part of it is the writing. I think that they wrote him to be too big.
He steals every scene he's in.
Yeah.
Essentially.
And he's in too many of those scenes. So Disney gets the rights to this movie in Saving Mr. Banks. How?
Well, basically there is a heart-to-heart between P.L. Travers and Walt Disney after they spend a day at Disneyland, which she hates, and I love that because I love Disneyland unabashedly. Mm-hmm. She would hate Disneyland,
she
though.
Would.
Too much whimsy.
It's the same reason that I suspect me as an adult would also not like Disneyland.
Look, here's what I think would happen. Yeah. You would go into Disneyland not wanting to like it.
And then just be charmed.
Oh, God. Yeah. This actually happened.
To you?
No, not to me, because my family actually has a history of Disneyland.
Oh, okay.
Fun fact, my dad went to Disneyland in 1955 when he was a little boy. That's the year it opened.
Oh.
So my family has always had a soft spot in our hearts for Disneyland.
Okay.
My husband Ryan does not like amusement parks. He doesn't like rides. Mm-hmm. So when I suggested that on our last trip to California in, get this, February of 2020.
Oh my.
Mid-February, right before the world ended, I said, let's go to Disneyland. And he was very reluctant, but they did have the Star Wars Land opening. I was like, humor me. I think you're going to love it. Skeptical. And then the minute we get there, it was all done for him.
He's like a little kid again.
He loved it.
Oh.
And we had a wonderful time. We ate at the Jolly Holiday Bakery, which is the Mary Poppins themed. Yeah, they've stained glass of little penguin waiters.
Oh, cute.
It's very charming.
Okay. Charming, again, is our buzzword of the day.
Absolutely.
We've said it more times in my life than I've ever said the word charming. Today.
Believe it or not, I say charming a lot. Does that
doesn't
you?
Surprise me.
No.
Nope.
I feel like, tell me if I'm wrong, Walt Disney and the relationship he has with P.L. Travers
is
it's
you and I.
Yeah, it's sort of our working
100%
relationship.
you and me.
Who do you think you are?
Oh, I know I'm P.L. Travers.
I know I'm Walt Disney.
There's no debate about that whatsoever.
No. You would tell somebody coming in with a cart of treats to be like, turn that jollification around.
You're like, listen, it's Jello, it jiggles. Yeah. Get it out of my sight.
And my enthusiasm might come off as phony. That's okay. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, 100%. So this has just been a biography of Roxanne and Mikayla.
going back to how Walt Disney finally got the rights after decades of asking P.L. Travers for them, Walt Disney flies all the way to London after the relationship sort of broke down in California, the working relationship, and he realizes that he needs to essentially manipulate P.L. Travers into giving rights by saying that this movie is really about Mr. Banks.
/ P.L. Travers' dad.
Yes. So in Saving Mr. Banks, we get these really wonderful flashbacks to her childhood in the outback of Australia, and man, it looks bleak. He manipulates her emotionally into signing over the rights by essentially making the movie really about Mr. Banks at heart. So whereas he's not in the book at all, in the movie, it's about his personal journey. Fun fact, did you know in the bank scene at the end of Mary Poppins, which does have more of a narrative than
the book.
Basically, the narrative is Mr. Banks' growth story.
Yeah, more or less.
Going from like a stressed out curmudgeon to being okay that he lost his job and then wants to go fly a kite.
Yeah.
In the bank scene, you see all the very old bankers, and one of the bankers is played by Dick Van Dyke.
Again, Dick Van Dyke is in this movie too darn much.
But he does somersaults, and that's fun. It's fun to see somebody who's playing an 80-year-old do a somersault. It's wacky.
We've already learned about my personality and how much I don't like wacky.
I didn't realize you didn't like wacky.
No, wacky is not up my alley.
I don't particularly like wacky, but Dick Van Dyke does it. He does wacky, and he does it good.
Wacky.
Let's quickly talk about other adaptation of Mary Poppins. During P.L. Travers' life, she was like, never again. She hated the movie.
Absolutely despised it.
In Save Mr. Banks, they show her having an emotional reaction to the Mr. Banks parts, but in reality, she really did hate this movie. She wasn't invited to the premiere, but she crashed it.
She straight up invited herself, which is pretty gutsy.
Pretty great.
Yeah, Paul Giamatti. And I'll never ever say that again. But I really like him in that movie. He just gets to me. His character is very sweet.
He is very sweet. He's a
driver.
Yeah,
more or less. Like a gopher.
He's a composite character.
Oh, yeah. There we go.
So they created him as a composite of all of the workers that P.L. Travers did have friendly relationships with during her time working at Disney Studios. Another wonderful Paul Giamatti story. So my wonderful mother, Alma, sent me a very classic mom text when Philip Seymour Hoffman died, who said, "Philip Seymour Hoffman died. I'm very sad. He was wonderful in Sideways." Which is my favorite.
That's adorable.
Yeah.
So, do you want to talk about the 2018 adaptation briefly?
Would you? Because I'm going to be completely honest. I sat down to watch it 4 times. Okay. I didn't get halfway through it.
Did you skip to the middle and watch 10 minutes of the middle?
Okay, so we talked about this with Mikayla, telling her I was having such a struggle to just sit down and watch the darn thing. And I said, I haven't even made it to Mary Poppins showing up. And so she said, skip to the middle. So I actually just made it to... They just got back from their undersea adventure. So I got that far. I didn't love
that either, so that's fine.
Okay.
Basically, the 2018 adaptation, also by Disney, is called Mary Poppins Returns.
I wanted to like it.
Yeah, and basically, Emily Blunt plays Mary Poppins, and she returns to the Banks family after however many years she's been gone. Michael has grown up and has 3 kids of his own.
No, he is a curmudgeon.
He is a curmudgeon.
And it takes place in the Depression.
Yeah. So his wife has died. He's bringing up 3 kids on his own.
His daughter's name is Annabelle, which is a callback to the book.
Yeah. So his children are trying to grow up. The bank is going to repossess the house because...
And it's the same house from
Mary Poppins, which I don't actually think it's the same house. It looks very different.
It does, but it's
supposed to be the same
17
house.
Cherry Tree Lane.
Yes. And Mary Poppins blows in on the wind, basically to save the family once again. It's got Emily Blunt, and she actually is very Julie Andrews-esque.
She's lovely.
In it, I actually think she's, again, very charming. Not a word I use often, but I've used a lot today.
But it was good casting.
Yeah, I think so. And
I think she got the blessing of Julie Andrews.
Probably. And she really obviously studied up on it because she does so many of the mannerisms the same way and some of the facial expressions the same way. So it's obvious that she was trying to be, because it's 2 different actresses, like 45 years apart.
She holds herself the same way.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be the same Mary Poppins.
Right. Yeah.
She gets offended when they say, like, you're not old.
Yeah. You have to suspend disbelief just a little bit.
Yeah. She's like Peter Pan in that way, huh?
Yeah, she really is. Lin-Manuel Miranda's also in it. For all of you Hamilton fans out there, he's fine.
It's weird to see him clean shaven.
Yeah, And I just have to say, and this might be a hot take too, I don't like him as an actor. I like him as a writer. I think he's okay in the Hamilton that they filmed. Not great, but okay. But everything...
Do you think you could do better, or what?
No. But I think someone could.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's a hot take.
Yeah. But everything I've ever seen him as an actor in, I don't love. And I definitely don't love him in this. He very much falls into the Dick Van Dyke school of being a lamplighter.
Well, speaking of, so he takes sort of the place of Bert. They ask, where's Bert? And it's such a lame excuse.
It's so lame.
He's off traveling the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
But Dick Van Dyke does show back up in this movie.
I didn't get that far.
I know you didn't get that far.
If I had known, I actually would have made it that far.
Well, you would have had to make it basically to the end.
Oh,
it's like the last 10 minutes of this film. He shows up. I don't think he's playing the same old man, but he's playing another old man who now like owns the bank.
Now he's an old man playing an old man?
Yeah.
How meta.
But he looks exactly like the character from Mary Poppins. Because now
goodness.
he is old and he's playing.
It's like Maggie Smith getting aged up in Peter Pan.
Yeah.
And now she
looks the same.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's basically that. So he makes a quick cameo in there. He kind of saves them at the end.
Is it like a Deus Ex Machina?
Deus Ex Machina? The whole movie is a Deus Ex
No,
Machina.
I have to be able to say it. Deus Ex Machina. There, I said it.
Yeah, it's like that because basically their whole time they're trying to find this deed, right, from Mr. Banks Sr., the father.
And then evil Colin Firth is the bank manager.
Yeah.
He burned it.
He burns
But I don't know why he did that.
I don't either. I don't really understand his motivation, honestly.
So they go to the bank and they say, Colin Firth,
they're like,
we're looking for it. And he says, oh, I'll do anything to help you. And then we see him burn it. But what would his motivation be?
They don't really gain anything from like owning their house. I guess maybe
like they would get the house
he would
back,
get the shares back. I don't know. It's a kids movie, so I don't think they expected you to pay attention.
Well, I was paying attention.
Oh, me too.
I was a Mary Poppins watchdog, and I am not satisfied.
It bothers me. Yeah, I still don't understand anything about him. Anyway, but yes, Deus Ex Machina, the kite that one of the kids patched up, it's Michael's kite from the first movie. They flip it over and the kid has patched it with the deed miraculously.
Oh, I called that.
Yeah. So, it's very obvious.
It was a little too
telegraphed from very far away.
Well, it was a little too on the nose when you see the kid with the
box of stuff.
Yeah, and then she says, we have to go to the park and you have to patch your kite. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's an okay movie.
It's
also got Angela Lansbury and Meryl Streep. I just want to I know. See, you didn't get far enough in this movie.
The Queens?
Yeah. Meryl Streep plays Topsy, who is not in the first book, but she is in Mary Poppins Returns. There's a chapter about her crazy cousin. He's a man in the book, but his whole world goes topsy-turvy every third Monday or first Monday or something like that. So
have you noticed in the books that they're very into on every third Monday?
Yes, or
Mary Poppins gets every second
Thursday off.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that just really tickled P.L. Travers.
I think so too. So Meryl Streep makes a quick appearance. She's got a whole song in there, and I'm so upset that you didn't make it through this song because boy howdy, you need to watch it.
Would I like it or hate it?
You would hate it, but you would love it because you hate it. And then Angela Lansbury, who I just love her, she shows up at the very end. She's the balloon lady who, again, isn't in Mary Poppins. She's in Mary Poppins Returns, I believe, and says everyone has a balloon for, a balloon that's like specifically your balloon. And they all, if you pick right, like magic will happen.
But balloons pop.
Shh. They all they all pick the balloon that's right for them, and it lifts them into the sky. And that's the end of that movie. Is everyone is just like flying up with their balloons.
So it turns into Up.
No, listen. If you ever compare this movie to Up again,
you're gonna come over this table.
I will straight up fight you.
You're gonna flip this podcasting
Up is
table.
my favorite movie of all time, and it's complete sacrilege to compare it to this movie. So
Dang.
yeah, it just got real in here, you guys.
Woo. Okay. Cut the tension with a knife.
Yeah, that's all I want to say about that movie. It's not bad. It's not great.
Tell me more about, quickly towards the end, the differences in personality between the movies of Mary Poppins. Mary Poppins in this Mary Poppins Returns is closer to the book.
Yes.
She's sarcastic,
Yeah, she's a little bit more
acerbic.
Yeah. She's got an edge to her. You can tell she's a little bit less likely to just like wink at the kids or have that sparkle in her eye. They're like, we don't believe in like fun stuff. And she was like, oh, I guess if you don't believe in fun stuff, we'll just go on this magical bathtub adventure underseas with these dolphins. But if you don't like it, you can just stay here, whatever. Yeah, she is.
At that point, I was like, I'm out.
She's like that throughout the movie. So she is closer to the book one, but she still is more happy and, you know, carefree than the Mary Poppins of the books.
We're going to talk about one more adaptation before we say goodbye today. Recently, they have made a Broadway musical of Mary Poppins, and I was fortunate enough to see it at Theater Under the Stars when I lived in Vancouver, Canada.
Is there anything you haven't seen?
I love
Cats.
theater.
I do too.
I have seen Cats.
Oh, okay.
But my friend and coworker Renee was Mary Poppins in this Theater Under the Stars production in beautiful Stanley Park. It's like the Central Park of Vancouver, and it's almost like a Shakespeare festival setting. So it's outdoors, and wow, it's an amazing show. It's really fun, and it has so many fun special effects. So of course she can fly, and seeing practical effects for her pulling objects out of her bag on stage is really fun. So if you get a chance to see the Broadway version, the musical of Mary Poppins, do it.
If you get a chance to see any Broadway musicals, this is what I'm discovering about us. We'll just tell you to go see them all, more or less.
Cats. Just watch the video.
You should watch. No, don't do that either. I mean, do, but be prepared to hate watch.
Anywho,
thank you guys for joining us today. This has been another episode of The Book Isn't Necessarily Better. I'm Mikayla.
And I'm Roxanne. And one last question, Mikayla, before we say goodbye. What would the flavor of your medicine be if it was given to you by Mary Poppins? So in the movie, she has rum punch, lime cordial, and
strawberry.
Strawberry.
Mine would probably be like a tropical smoothie.
Oh, okay.
It's like pineapple mango.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay.
You?
Blackberry.
There you have it.
Blackberry crumble.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much for joining us. We will hear from you next time.
Goodbye. Look, we're being so reasonable and nice to each other. Neverland.
So you're Cockney?
Yes. It's so bad, right?
Okay, it's very bad. Okay, sorry.
I have a crush on Mr. Banks. There, I said it.
Oh.
Yes.
No.
Yes.